Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our first ever Fundstrat Capital webinar about our ETF, Granny Shots, ticker GRNY. We've got many reasons for wanting to communicate with you on our Granny Shots ETF. And over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to give you an overview of the ETF itself, talk a little bit about an update of where things stand, describe the strategy, and then talk about performance. And then we will take some questions from those who are participating. Now, let me start with the overview. The Granny Shots ETF was launched just about a month ago. And the purpose of this was to take our research model, which was called Granny Shots, and it's been in inception since 2019, and what represented a core stock list of ideas, and allow investors to actually own that directly. The ETF team is comprised of 4 of us currently. It's myself, I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Fundstrat Capital and the Portfolio Manager of GRNY. Ken Shen, who is also known as Tireless Ken, is also a portfolio manager. Steve Quinn is head of asset management and really is involved with the strategy. And Carrie Presley is the ETF product specialist. Now you might wonder, what is a granny shot? And the granny shot derives its name from basketball, and it's a way of doing a free throw shoot underhanded, as you can see in this video. It is actually the correct technical way to throw a free throw shot using physics, and Rick Barry, NBA Hall of Famer, used this technique and actually scored 90% of his free throws using a granny shot. And the traditional free throw method, which is what you can see Shaquille O'Neal doing here, has a success rate of only 50%. Well, that's how we want to find stock ideas. We want to actually find stocks that are going to give you the highest probability of winning. And the way we do that is we employ a thematic approach to finding stock names. This is popularized by many macro investors. In fact, Stan Druckenmiller, who worked with Soros and ran Duquesne's family office, famously said that 70% of the return of a stock is macro. And what he means by that is getting the right stock in the right themes. And in fact, we agree it's important to buy the strongest stocks in the most important themes. But the way we achieve this as a granny shot is that we identify the 7 themes that we think are the most important to the market. For instance, in the current granny shots portfolio construction, we're looking at things like millennials, things that are driven by millennials and their particular tastes, by the shortage of global labor supply, meaning there's a shortage of prime age workers, and the resulting rise of automation, energy and cybersecurity, as well as the fact that the Fed is easing financial conditions, or simply put, the Fed is dovish. There are also some shorter term, or what we call tactical approaches. One is style tilt, that, believe it or not, every few months, a different type of style actually is in favor, principally due to momentum, but other factors are at play. The second is that there's seasonality. And this is pretty well understood that there's a lot of seasonality in the stock market, which is really hard to explain, but sometimes the calendar makes a difference. And of course, environmentally, we're talking about the fact that the PMIs, which is a proxy for the business cycle, is in recovery. So we take these 7 themes here. We make a list of stocks that are the strongest in each theme, but then we only want to buy stocks that are in multiple themes. For instance, if we zoom in here, a stock like Meta is in 5 themes. So that's what we consider one of the strongest grannies. And there's plenty of stocks that are in 4 themes like Google, Garmin, Caterpillar, etc. So that's an overview of how we sort of develop and use the granny shots approach. Now we want to talk about an update of Granny, and I'm going to turn this over to Steve to talk about that.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. And first off, thanks to everyone in the community who has been supportive of the launch of the Granny Shot ETF. As Tom mentioned, we launched the ETF not even a month ago on November 7th. And we get a lot of questions concerning AUM and growth. So I thought I'd highlight a few things. First off, we launched Granny Shots with just $1 million of seed capital, and that was independent seed capital that came from a market maker. And so what that means is our growth to $470 million in assets as of November 29th, so less than a month old, has all been organic from investors, which we're super appreciative of. There's also, I think, liquidity is another aspect of the fund that we should talk about for a moment. A lot of people ask about secondary liquidity. If you look at our average daily trading volume since we launched, we're right at about 2.4 million shares a day. And while that's very strong on its own, I think it's important to pull back a layer and look at what is the implied liquidity of Granny Shots given the underlying names, which are large cap US equities. And if we use Bloomberg as a source here, you have implied liquidity that's much higher at nearly $2 billion of daily liquidity per day in dollar terms, or 95 million shares per day in share terms. Now, I mentioned that we launched with $1 million of seed capital. And if you look at the growth in AUM from a flow standpoint in our first 3 weeks, I think the bottom of this slide is quite telling. In 2024 to date, there have been 625 ETFs launched in the US. That's across all asset classes, all strategies, passive funds, active funds. And if you look at their flows in the first 3 weeks, the Granny Shot ETF actually ranks 9th among those 625 funds. And I think it's also important to note that includes all of the robust crypto products that came out at the beginning of the year. So we're super excited about the growth in flows and the support we've seen from everyone, and look forward to serving everyone going forward. I'm going to pass it back to Tom and Ken to spend some time and go a bit deeper into the strategy.
Thank you, Steve. That was really helpful. I'm going to now turn this over to Tireless Ken to talk about the strategy of Granny Shots itself and really breaking it down in a detailed way so that you could have a lot of your questions answered.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. This is Ken Xuan. I'm also the co-portfolio manager for Fundstrat Granny Shots US Large Cap ETF, ticker GRNY. So in my part, let me kind of go through with you how the process for us to construct our portfolio and also kind of review some of the performance since the launch. So here is kind of like a general workflow for us to create the portfolio to find the right stock in the right themes. First of all, at the Fundstrat, as you might familiar, Fundstrat, we do have that kind of macro research gene here. I think what's unique for this kind of Granny Shot ETF is, we're using that kind of top-down process to identify the themes and using that kind of bottoms-up process to select the stocks. So for the top-down process, as you might know that we do a lot of macro research, market research, economic research, and on the right here are some topics and research we've been doing and we've done. And once we have that kind of analysis, then we will have generate our strategies, and we will see which tailwind in the near term and which tailwind in the longer term, and then we try to. The next step is kind of construct the portfolios. The first step is we want to identify which stocks. We're trying to create a universe to see which stocks that has positive leverage or exposure to that kind of tailwind. Then we use our proprietary Granny Quant model, which we've been using since we launched this Granny Shot as a portfolio research since back in 2019. And this step, we're really using this kind of quant model to screen out the quality stocks within the universe. Then, of course, the last step will kind of involve in this kind of active part of this ETF. We do like check each stock one by one, bottoms up to, looking at their financial statement, their recent like technicals and other factors to determine whether this stock is a is a right one in this themes. So I know it's kind of hard to just talk this kind of generic process with you. But I do want to like maybe provide one of example to you so you could better understand how we do this kind of process. So first of all, well, you might know if you're familiar with Fundstrat research, we have been doing a lot of like demographic studies. Actually, one of the five principle for Tom's investment thesis was one was like demographic is the destiny, which is very true. And here when we study the global demographic trend, we see there is a global labor shortage happening, and it will actually last for another 30-40 years. So, well, before when this happened, we normally see the job or being transferred into the developing countries such as like, Asian countries, China, Asian tigers. But this time we think, the globalization process and also, the technology part is much more robust, much more ready than before. So we think that AI, automation, and even robotics could be the solution here. Okay, then the next step is which stock has the best leverage to this AI, automation, and robotics. So for here, we kind of looking at from the hardware perspective, we're trying to identify stock from the software perspective, and also we're trying to see which company or which kind of industry or business are actually benefit from this kind of bigger trend of AI or even automation adoptions. Then once we have that kind of universe, again, we apply our GRNY quant model, the GQM, to kind of screen out the quality stocks that the stock is financially strong from that universe. Then, of course, we do go stock by stock to see whether the stock, recent movement is strong or is weak, or if the recent earning has the company give us good guidance, and just overall, we just want to like make sure each stock is the right stock in the themes. So this is kind of like general process for us to construct a portfolio, and I just provide one example for the global labor supplier themes. And we have other 6 themes. They also follow this kind of same methodologies. Then finally, again, for a stock to be including the final GRNY ETF, it has to be at least 2 of the 7 themes. And as Tom mentioned, the more theme a stock is in, and we think the stock will receive more tailwind, macro tailwind. Therefore, we think it's more likely to outperform the market in the long run. So that's kind of our process. Then let's talk about the performance. So we launched this GRNY, the GRNY ETF, launched on November 7th, and so far has been a good start. The GRNY ETF has been up by, by the way, this is as of the end of November. So as of the end of November, GRNY has been up by 354 bips, while the S&P 500 index being up 186 index. So during the same period, our ETF beat the market by around 170 bips. And this is the best 5 performer. Well, Axon Enterprise, Axon Enterprise is in our style to and easing financial conditions themes. Axon has been really under our radar since 2020. We see a lot of like social unrest plus rising crime rate. So Axon, as a device maker for those law enforcement, we think is actually benefit from that bigger trend. But of course, I think the recent adoption of the AI technology, I think they're using that kind of AI model tools to recognize license plate and other stuff. I think that will also make Axon a good candidates for the global labor supplier themes. And for number 2 is actually Tesla. Well, I don't think I need to explain much about Tesla. Well, if I really have to do, I think Tesla, just one reminder that don't think Tesla is a car company or or just an EV company. Well, yes, Tesla is actually, I think Tesla is favored by a lot of like younger generation, like millennials, is actually in our millennial themes. But I think more important, Tesla is it's really like a software, AI, and even the robotics firm. Their robotaxi and the FSD, and plus the rising Tesla bots. I think those are actually really the solution for the global labor shortage that we're gonna be in next 30, 40 years. So that's why I think Tesla has been in our Granisha holdings, like I mean like the research product back in when we actually first launched it, the Granisha as a research product back in 2019. So I think it's still a secular hold or secular buy. This is the bottom 5 performer. Well, I think the last two, the TransDigm and the Lido, are pretty similar. They are well, TransDigm is in our PMI recovery theme plus style tooth, and Lido's in our PMI recovery theme plus the energy and cybersecurities. Well, those two industrial name has highly leveraged to the government spending, government contract. So I know since the election, many stocks are being up, thanks to that kind of Trump trade. A lot of technical stocks actually being up, but those two stocks actually get hurt by that kind of, well, the Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, because I mean investors are kind of worried about that Doge will causing the government spend less. So those kind of government contract play here kind of getting hit. But overall, if you look at their financial statement, I mean, I think they're still very financially sound firm. They have strong financial and low leverage. So overall, I think they're still very good quality stock to own. That's all for me. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ken. Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Presley. Since the launch of the Granny Shots ETF, we have received several questions, and we wanted to take a moment today to address some of your most frequently asked questions. So let's get started. First up, the Granny Shots ETF is actively managed with a fee of 75 basis points. Can you explain how this fee is calculated?
Oh, sure, Carrie. So as Tom mentioned earlier, the expense ratio for the Granny Shot ETF is 0.75%. In terms of how that fee impacts the ETF or how investors are paying that fee, a portion of that fee comes out of our net asset value each day. So our NAV is actually reduced each day by a portion of that fee. So there's no end of month or end of period makeup where we're taking fees out. And that's why we actually report performance on an NAV basis so that it is already adjusted for the fee.
Okay, next question is around dividends. How are dividends determined and how often are dividends paid?
I can take that one. First of all, thanks for the question. So in the short answer is yes, we do pay out dividend and we do plan to pay out every 3 months, so every quarters. But the objective of this fund is really for seeking long-term capital appreciation. So we're not aimed to generating that kind of monthly income for you. So the amount of dividend will vary, depends on our holdings. So if our holding has fewer dividend paying out, then we will have lower dividend amount per quarters. And dividend is one of the consideration in our stock selection process, but that's not our main focus.
Okay, next up, this question is for Tom. Tom, you often discuss Bitcoin. Why isn't MicroStrategy included as a holding in the Granny Shots ETF?
Thanks for the question. It's actually pretty straightforward. We get this question a lot. Our addressable universe of stocks is the S&P 500 universe. So there's only 500 stocks that are the basis for what will be Granny Shots. MicroStrategy is currently not a member of the S&P 500.
All right, next question. Where can investors find the most updated list of holdings? Actually, I'll take this one. You can find the latest holdings performance data at grannyshots.com. In addition, we offer strategy insights, weekly update videos from Tom and the team. You can also access future webinar invites as well as the replays. For example, today's webinar will be posted at grannyshots.com for access at a later time. Or if you'd like to share, definitely share. All right, so let's head to our next question. So for those of you that may be new to Fundstrat research, we provide research accessible to retail investors at fsinsight.com. This question is actually from one of our FS Insight members. I used to trade stocks from the Granny Shots list. Why should I consider the ETF instead?
I can answer part of it, and I think maybe I'll give Steve part of this. Well, thank you for being a member of the FS Insight family and community. I do appreciate you very much. The Granny Shots core stock list is no longer available for FS Insight members. That list is now wholly maintained within Fundstrat Capital and the Granny ETF. There still is the SMID Granny Shots list, which we maintain, but that's for a non-S&P 500 list of stocks. And Steve, I don't know if you want to answer the
Sure.
second half of the question.
Sure. Thanks, Tom, and thank you again for the question. It's important to highlight the tax efficiency of the ETF wrapper. So while we don't give specific tax advice, when we get this question, one of the things we talk about is the ability of the ETF to use the create redeem mechanism. And while we can't promise that we won't have capital gains in the fund, by using that create redeem mechanism, we should be able to mitigate the amount of capital gains that we generate far more efficiently than an individual who's trading the names themselves every time we rebalance, every time we trade on their own in a taxable account. So it's a key feature of all ETFs, and we're excited that we're able to use that in an active product like Granny Shots.
All right, next question. I've seen Granny's performance since launch as compared to SPY, but doesn't the management fee reduce these returns?
Yeah, so I think especially if you're looking at our performance on a NAV basis, that takes into account the fee. So you are looking at a net of fee performance when you compare the two, and that's the data that Ken was sharing earlier.
So Steve, are you saying 6 months from now, if someone's looking at the price change of Granny versus the price change of SPY, both are already adjusted for the fees for the funds?
Great question, Tom. So if they're looking at the NAV of SPY versus the NAV of Granny Shots, then they are looking at that comparison net of fee, which is important to do versus, say, looking at the market price of both of those products.
All right, next question with a similar sentiment. I own the Qs. Should I sell it to buy Granny?
The Granny Shots ETF, ticker GRNY, is an actively managed fund with a concentrated list of holdings, anywhere from 30 to 50 stocks. So to us, this is what we'd call a core list of stocks, giving you exposure to the most important themes in the market and finding the strongest stocks. So to me, it's very different than the NASDAQ 100, which is a passive index representing the 100 largest companies out there. I don't know if someone else wants to add to that.
Yeah, Tom, I'll quickly add to that. Our benchmark and our starting point is the S&P 500. I think of a lot of investors, especially those who work with an advisor, likely have exposure to both. One of the things that we think is unique about the Granny Shots is the process, the investment process and strategy itself. Many investors have exposure to beta or passive product, as Tom was mentioning. Many investors will also have exposure to active products, but they're primarily bottom-up based, trying to look deep into companies themselves. Whereas the uniqueness of the granny shot strategy, with the active top down combined with the quantamental bottom up, we think enables people to really diversify the strategy of their portfolio as well.
Okay, well, the next question is quite individualized. I think this could apply to others as well. I'm trying to buy Granny on Merrill Edge, but it's unavailable. How or when can I access Granny?
Thanks, Carrie, and thank you for the question. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone who works on the major platforms, who have reached out to us and told us I'd really like to see granny shots approved on our platform. We are working with all of the major platforms. Each platform will have its own set of rules and requirements for us to meet in order to be onboarded. But based on my experience, what you find is one of the most important criteria for any product being onboarded is that there's demand from the advisors on that platform. So I would ask, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what platform you're on, just as this question is Merrill. And we in turn will also share with you who the correct people are on your platform if you'd like to reach out and express your interest in having granny shots added to your platform as well. Thank you.
And Steve, I'll expand on that. If you're having trouble purchasing Granny or you have any questions, our team is here to help. Please email at inquiry@fundstratcapital.com, or you can also visit grannyshots.com and use the contact us form. All right, last question. I noticed the price of Granny changed during the day. How can I ensure I'm getting the best price?
I'm happy to answer that. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you for the question. There are just a few best practices that I would mention here when trading any ETF. First off, I would always try, unless you absolutely can't, but I would always focus on trading within US market hours. I think that's important. Number two, always look at what the NAV, net asset value per share, is that's posted on the website. Now, that's the NAV from the prior day, but it's a really good guidepost to help you understand where granny shots should be trading. So look at the NAV, look at what the market is doing that day to help you determine where you think granny shots should be trading. And then from there, perhaps the most important best practice to highlight is, regardless of the size of your order, the sophistication of the investor, always use a limit order when trading an ETF. And if you're on a platform, please work with the traders on your platform to ensure that they're sourcing liquidity properly for you.
Thank you, Steve, Ken, and Tom, and thank you all for joining us for our very first Fundstrat Granny Shots ETF webinar. We plan to host monthly webinars to cover topics more in depth, like themes and strategy, also discuss recent performance, and we want to make sure to address your questions. Before we wrap up, here's how you can stay updated. Visit grannyshots.com, subscribe to receive fund updates directly to your email. Also, make sure to follow Fundstrat Capital on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube for the latest insights, videos, updates, all the things. Thank you again. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in January of 2025, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.